So lust isn't just a distraction, it's a doorway. And maybe, just maybe, it's trying to teach us something far more profound than we realize. You see, we often imagine that spiritual enlightenment is some sort of escape from the human condition, as if by waking up, by becoming aware, one is suddenly exempt from the very instincts that make us human. But that's the great illusion. In truth, to be awakened is not to transcend the body, but to embrace its complexity, its ache, its beauty, and yes, even its desires. The chosen ones, the so-called awakened, live with a peculiar tension. They know deep in their being that they are more than just flesh and bone. They feel the pulse of something eternal beneath the surface of form. And yet, here they are, incarnated, living in skin, with hormones, with urges, with hungers that do not vanish simply because they've tasted spiritual awareness. If anything, awareness magnifies everything. It makes life more vivid, more intense, more real. And that includes lust. Lust is not the enemy. Lust is energy, raw, undirected, powerful. It is not evil, as some might suggest. It is not a moral failure or a spiritual flaw. It is the natural fire that arises when life longs to know itself more intimately. The problem is not in the feeling, but in the framing. We have been taught to split ourselves in two, the sacred and the profane, the soul and the body, the holy and the horny. And such divisions are artificial. They come not from spirit, but from systems designed to control spirit. You see, when one is chosen, when one begins to walk the path of awareness, they carry within them the duality of the human and the divine. And that duality does not vanish with more meditation, more fasting, more prayer. If anything, those practices bring the contrast into sharper focus. The more you try to escape desire, the more it follows you, like a shadow you haven't yet made peace with. Because quite simply, you cannot be fully alive and not feel desire. To be without desire is to be a ghost. The mistake we often make is thinking that lust is merely about the body, that it is base, animalistic, lower. But desire, at its core, is sacred. It is the movement of life itself. It is the longing to merge, to dissolve into something or someone beyond the self. It is the echo of the soul's deepest truth, that we are not separate, that we crave union. And while lust may clothe itself in the language of bodies, its root is often far deeper. And so chosen ones struggle not because they are weak, but because they are awake. They feel the pull of heaven and the gravity of earth simultaneously. They want to be pure, yet they are also passionate. They want stillness, yet they are stirred. And in that sacred tension, they suffer. But the suffering too is holy, because it is honest. To wrestle with lust is not a failure. It is a sign that one is alive, fully alive. And being fully alive means being willing to sit with the paradoxes of existence. The chosen are not above temptation. They are inside it. They are dancing with it. They are learning slowly that perhaps the path is not to conquer the flesh, but to listen to it, to honor its wisdom, to let the energy of desire become a fire that warms, not burns. Because in the end, the body is not your enemy. It is your temple. What happens when we tell a river not to flow, when we dam it, block it, shame it for moving in the direction it was born to follow? It doesn't disappear. It builds pressure. It gathers force behind the walls we construct until eventually it finds a way to burst through, often chaotically, sometimes destructively. So it is with desire, especially with lust. When we suppress it, judge it, hide it beneath cloaks of guilt and spiritual pride, It doesn't vanish. It festers. It grows teeth in the dark. The chosen ones, those attuned to spiritual truths, often find themselves in this paradox. They believe that to walk a higher path means denying their lower instincts. They are told, sometimes by well-meaning voices and sometimes by their own ego, that desire must be conquered, tamed, even obliterated. And so they put on masks, they pretend they are untouched by longing. They suppress, they shame, but in doing so they forget a fundamental truth. Anything repressed does not die. It waits, and waiting in silence. Desire becomes distorted. It no longer flows gently, creatively, sensually. It turns compulsive, obsessive, even violent. The more one tries not to feel, the more consumed they become by the feeling. This is not failure, it is nature. It is the universe reminding you that what is denied always returns. Energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be transformed, or ignored at one's peril. There is a peculiar irony in this. The more spiritual someone becomes, the more pressure they may feel to appear pure, detached, unaffected by lust. But underneath that polished exterior a storm may rage, because the body knows, the body remembers. The body wants to live, to move, to express itself, and when its voice is silenced, it begins to scream in subtler ways, through dreams, impulses, fantasies, anxieties, addictions. The struggle with lust, then, is not because the chosen ones are corrupt. It is because they are honest bodies caught in a dishonest world. Suppression becomes a prison. It is not self-retribution, it is fear in disguise. Fear of being exposed, fear of being less than divine, fear of being seen as unworthy. But what if we are not meant to be spotless? What if the goal is not to be without desire, but to become so intimate with it that we can carry it lightly, reverently, without shame? To suppress is to separate. It is to say, this part of me is not welcome. And every time you exile a part of yourself, you fracture the whole. But true wholeness, true spirituality, is integration. It is the art of welcoming all that you are, even the parts you are taught to hide, especially those. Because in the embrace of what we once rejected, we find our liberation. Lust is not something to be annihilated. It is to be understood. It is not a dragon to slay, but a voice to hear. And when heard with compassion, rather than condemnation, it begins to soften. It reveals its source, and you may find beneath the fire of lust a softer longing, a longing to be seen, to be held, to be known. Completely, the chosen ones are not failing because they struggle with lust. They are merely discovering how deep the human experience truly runs. They are learning that suppression is not sanctity, that denial is not discipline, that the sacred is not found in pretending, but in presence. So instead of fighting the river, learn to swim. Instead of damming the current, build channels that guide it into beauty. Because the energy you repress today becomes the chaos you meet tomorrow. But the energy you welcome, have you ever truly stopped to wonder what it is that we long for when we feel lust? Not simply the desire to touch or be touched, but that ache that pulses beneath the surface, the whisper that says, there's more, something deeper, something closer. You see, what we often call lust is not merely a craving for skin or sensation. It is, in its truest form, a veiled desire for union, for closeness, for the sacred collapse of boundaries. It is the soul's attempt to remember its oneness with the infinite, disguised as physical yearning. The chosen ones feel this more acutely because they are sensitive, not weak, not fragile, but vibrationally tuned to something beyond the ordinary. Their inner world is wired to perceive subtleties others overlook. So when desire rises, it is not just a flicker. It is a flood. It sweeps them into longing, not just for bodies, but for something eternal that bodies only seem to promise. And yet the body becomes the symbol, the metaphor, the altar upon which that deeper yearning dances. In this light, lust becomes something entirely different. It is not sin. It is a spiritual hunger trying to wear human clothes, the desire to be deeply seen, profoundly known, wholly embraced. This is not lust of the flesh, but longing of the spirit. And the body becomes the instrument, the sacred vessel through which that yearning seeks expression. This is why even the briefest touch, the softest gaze, can carry the weight of eternity. It's because we live in a world that has taught us to be ashamed of the body, to fragment the spiritual and the sensual, we often misread this yearning. We think we are craving pleasure, when in fact we are craving presence. We believe we are seeking bodies, when we are seeking belonging. The body, in all its beauty, becomes the map, but not the destination. This is where the chosen ones often become confused, because they feel something powerful and assume it is base. They assume that if it is physical, it must be low. But this belief stems not from truth, but from conditioning. It is not the experience of lust that binds them. It is the judgment of it. The fear that if they follow the thread of desire, it will lead them away from the divine. But here is the paradox. What if it leads them closer? In many ancient traditions, the sensual and the sacred were not enemies but allies. Tantra, for instance, did not deny the body but exalted it. The act of union was not a descent into sin, but an ascent into the mystery of oneness. In that space, two souls did not merely touch, they dissolved into the whole. The moment of surrender, the height of ecstasy, was seen not as the end of the path, but the beginning of divine remembrance. This, then, is what lust can offer, not a fall from grace, but an invitation back to it. If we are willing to look beyond the surface, we begin to see that desire is not the problem. The problem is forgetting what desire is pointing toward. It is not calling us simply to gratification. It is calling us to God, to Source, to the intimacy of all things touching all things. It is the soul's cry to feel again what it once knew, to be so close to another that all separation disappears. So the next time desire rises, the chosen ones must not shrink away in guilt or fear. Instead, they must ask the deeper question, what am I truly longing for? Because behind every fantasy is a hidden truth. Behind every pulse of lust is a sacred invitation. And behind every moment of craving is the echo of love calling you home. There is a certain loneliness that comes with being awake. To be chosen is to be set apart, not by ego or arrogance, but by vibration, by vision, by a depth of perception that most cannot or will not see. And with that vision comes isolation, a solitude that is both sacred and sorrowful. The chosen one often walks alone, not because they desire solitude, but because the world they perceive no longer fits into the common mold. They feel everything more. The joy is deeper, yes, but so is the ache, and this solitude, for all its spiritual benefit, leaves a space inside, a hollow echo, a longing for closeness that doesn't just exist in the mind, but lives in the body. You see, when you spend most of your time in the realm of thoughts, of spirit, of visions and philosophies, the body begins to call you back. It whispers through sensation, through hunger, through desire. It reminds you, you are still here. You are still flesh. This is where lust often arises, not as a betrayal of the path, But as the body's way of grounding the soul in a life that feels increasingly transcendent, the physical calls out, asking not to be forgotten. It says, "Don't float so high above the earth that you forget the pleasure of being human." And in that moment of longing, of aching for touch, for connection, for union, lust steps in, not as a curse, but as a call home. Chosen ones often struggle here, because they have been taught that spirituality must mean denial, that solitude is strength, and desire is a detour. But the truth is far more nuanced. Solitude reveals the soul, yes, but connection nourishes it. To go too long without the warmth of another, without the intimacy of shared presence, is to dry out the wellspring of being. Lust, then, becomes a signal that something inside is yearning to be watered. It is easy to mistake this yearning as weakness, to feel ashamed for wanting what seems too human. But this shame only deepens the divide. The more the chosen one denies their need for intimacy, the more they suffer in silence. They begin to feel fragmented, wise in spirit but starved in heart and body, and that starvation breeds restlessness. The desire that was once gentle becomes insistent. The longing that was once poetic becomes physical, and because it has no healthy outlet, it often turns inward into confusion, frustration, and secret battles no one sees. That there is another way. Instead of resisting this need, one can learn to honor it, to see it not as weakness but as a sacred truth, that even the awakened need warmth, that even the enlightened need to be held. The body is not a cage for the soul, it is a companion, a partner, a lover of life itself. And when it cries out through desire, it is not sabotaging your journey, it is asking to be included in it. It's separation. It's victory. It is asking to be included in it. To be chosen does not mean to live without. It means to live with awareness. To meet each moment, each sensation, each longing, not with judgment but with curiosity. To ask, what is this feeling trying to show me? Sometimes the answer is simple, that you are tired of being alone. And in that moment of honesty, something shifts. The struggle softens, the shame lifts, and desire, once hidden in the shadows, becomes a companion rather than a curse. Letting it just be. So yes, the chosen ones do struggle with lust, but not because they are impure. It is because they have tasted something eternal and still must dwell in the temporal. They have seen the stars and yet sleep in skin, and between those two truths the ache of isolation makes itself known. But if met with compassion, that ache becomes a doorway, not to shame, but to connection. Not to sin, but to wholeness. The curious thing about life is that it hides its deepest lessons in the most unexpected places. It is not always the temple or the monastery that awakens us. Sometimes it is the raw, unfiltered experience of being human. And of all human experiences, lust is perhaps one of the most misunderstood and most transformative. You see, lust is not simply an urge to be indulged or suppressed. It is a teacher, one that does not use words but sensation, one that does not whisper doctrine, but exposes the hidden architecture of our desires, our fears, our unmet needs. For the chosen ones, those whose spirits have been stirred awake, lust often arrives not as a shallow craving, but as a profound confrontation. It shows them where their attachments live, where their longing has become entangled, where their pursuit of purity has been built on fear, not freedom. And in that mirror, they do not see failure, they see themselves, not the version dressed in spiritual ideals, but the honest, wild, aching creature that lives beneath the layers of enlightenment. What happens when you do not run from that image? When you stay, when you look it in the eye, when you listen to what it is really saying, you begin to realize that lust in its purest form is not interested in degrading you. It is trying to reveal you. It pulls up from the depths the parts of you that you have not yet made peace with. Your hunger for connection, your need to be touched, not just in body, but in soul, your longing to surrender, to melt, to disappear into something larger than yourself. Lust then becomes a kind of spiritual fire, one that, if met consciously, can burn away illusion. But to do this, one must stop labeling lust as bad. The moment we cast it into the realm of shame, we lose the opportunity to learn from it, because shame closes the heart. It builds walls where there should be doors, and in that closure we no longer ask questions, we only hide. But to see lust as a teacher is to reopen the heart. It is to ask, what is this energy showing me? Where is it guiding me? What truth lies beneath this heat? Sometimes the truth is simple. You are lonely. You want to be held. You want to feel alive in someone else's arms. Other times the truth is more layered. Perhaps you are trying to use the body to fill a spiritual void. Or perhaps you have not yet learned how to carry your own sacred fire without setting yourself ablaze. But whether the lesson is comfort or caution, lust always brings a message, and the chosen ones, if they are wise, will sit at its feet and listen. The great irony is that what we resist most often holds the very wisdom we seek. We meditate, we pray, we chant, hoping to reach God, and all the while there is this burning within us, this aching presence we try to silence, not realizing that it too may be pointing the way. The energy of lust is not separate from the energy of creation. It is the same current moving through different channels. When refined through awareness, that same energy that once tempted you to escape can instead inspire you to return, to presence, to embodiment. So the next time lust visits you, do not rush to condemn it. Instead, welcome it as a visitor with a strange tongue and a wild scent. Ask it what it knows about you that you have not yet dared to admit. Let it teach you not how to escape your desire, but how to walk with it, how to hold it, how to transform it into a deeper kind of intimacy with yourself and the divine. Because in the end, everything can be your teacher if you are willing to learn, even lust, especially lust. Ah, the paradox of being chosen. You feel the weight of a higher calling, yet within you stirs an undeniable force, lust, desire, craving. It seems almost contradictory, doesn't it? Those destined for greatness, those walking the spiritual path, are often the very ones who struggle most with temptation. But why? You see, the struggle isn't a sign of weakness. It's proof of your depth. It means you are alive, that your spirit is sensitive, that you feel the intensity of existence. Lust is not merely physical, it is energy, raw and untamed. And like fire, it can destroy or it can illuminate. But here's the secret. Resisting it blindly only strengthens its grip. True mastery is not about suppression, but about understanding. It is about seeing desire for what it truly is, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. So let's explore the 5 reasons why the chosen ones secretly struggle with lust, and how, through awareness, we can transcend it. You see, the struggle isn't a sign of weakness. It's proof of your depth. It means you are alive, that your spirit is sensitive, that you feel the intensity of existence. Lust is not merely physical. It is energy, raw and untamed, and like fire, it can destroy or it can illuminate. But here's the secret. Resisting it blindly only strengthens its grip. True mastery is not about suppression, but about understanding. It is about seeing desire for what it truly is, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Those who are chosen, those who walk the path of purpose, experience this struggle more intensely because they exist between two worlds, the material and the spiritual. It is as if there is a deep knowing inside them, a calling towards something divine, yet the body, the mind, the instincts, they still whisper of earthly pleasures. This is not a flaw, but a fundamental reality of being human. The more one is aware of the spiritual, the more one also becomes aware of the pull of the physical. The light exposes the shadows. It is not the ordinary who wrestle with lust in this way. It is those who have glimpsed something higher, something beyond, and now find themselves torn between the hunger of the body and the yearning of the soul. Desire itself is not the problem. In fact, it is a force that drives all of life forward. The same energy that manifests as lust also fuels passion, ambition, creativity, and devotion. It is the fire that builds civilizations, composes symphonies, writes poetry, and prays with fervor. The problem is not the energy, but our relationship to it. Most people are at war with desire. They either indulge in it mindlessly, becoming slaves to pleasure, or they suppress it harshly, hoping to bury it deep where it can no longer touch them. But what is repressed never truly disappears. It lingers beneath the surface, growing stronger, waiting for an opening. The chosen ones suffer most because they often attempt to deny their own humanity, believing that their spiritual calling means they must somehow rise above desire. But to transcend is not to reject, it is to transform. There is a reason why every great spiritual figure in history has faced temptation. Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree as Mara, the embodiment of desire, sent his daughters to seduce him. Jesus fasted in the wilderness and was tempted. The ancient sages and mystics all knew the same truth. Desire is not the enemy, but a test, a threshold, a fire through which one must walk to become something greater. It is not the absence of lust that makes one holy. It is the awareness of it, the ability to see it clearly, to recognize its pull, and to neither be enslaved by it nor fear it. What then is the way forward? It is not about fighting lust, nor is it about surrendering to it. It is about seeing it for what it truly is. Energy, longing, a misplaced hunger for something deeper. When you feel the stirrings of desire, do not run from them. Do not shame yourself. Instead, ask, what is this truly seeking? Is it merely physical pleasure, or is it a longing for connection, for love, for wholeness? Often what we mistake for lust is actually a deeper thirst, for meaning, for unity, for something beyond ourselves. The chosen ones struggle with lust, not because they are weak, but because they are strong enough to feel everything deeply. Their awareness makes them see what others ignore. But this is also their path to transcendence. Instead of being consumed by desire or trying to annihilate it, they learn to channel it. Lust can be alchemized into passion, creativity, devotion. It can be transformed into something higher. The very fire that tempts can also purify. And when this realization dawns, the struggle becomes something else entirely, not a burden, not a curse, but a gateway to deeper understanding. Lust is not merely a physical urge. It is raw energy, untamed and powerful. It is the same force that moves the stars, that fuels creation, that drives every being towards something more. And yet, in the minds of the chosen ones, this energy becomes a battlefield. It is as if they stand at the intersection of the divine and the earthly, feeling both the call of the heavens and the weight of human nature. They struggle not because they are weak, but because they are intensely alive, acutely aware of the forces moving within them. Desire itself is not evil. It is life's natural expression, the pulse of existence itself. To desire is to be human, and to be human is to experience longing. The problem is not lust, but the way it is understood. Society has conditioned people to see it as a dark, shameful thing, something to either suppress completely or indulge in recklessly. But this is a misunderstanding. The chosen ones, those who walk a higher path, often find themselves caught in this misunderstanding. feeling the weight of their desires and believing they must either conquer them through force or be swallowed whole by them. But desire is not meant to be battled, it is meant to be understood. Look at nature. The river does not fight its current, it flows with it. The wind does not resist its own movement. It moves freely across the earth. Likewise, lust, when seen clearly, when neither rejected nor clung to, becomes something entirely different. It ceases to be a force of destruction and instead becomes a source of power, of creation, of transformation. It is not the presence of desire that causes suffering. It is the resistance to it, the fear of it, the misunderstanding of it. The chosen ones suffer because they feel this energy so strongly, and without the right understanding they do not know what to do with it. There is a misconception that spirituality requires the elimination of desire. Many believe that to be pure, one must be without lust, without longing, without any trace of earthly craving. But this is an illusion. Desire is not meant to be annihilated. It is meant to be refined, to be directed, to be transmuted. When the great mystics and sages spoke of overcoming desire, they did not mean to destroy it, but to elevate it, to transform base craving into divine longing, to turn fleeting pleasure into lasting fulfillment. The chosen ones often struggle because they attempt to suppress rather than transmute, and suppression only deepens the shadow. What is lust at its core? It is a longing for connection, for unity, for something beyond the self. At its most surface level it manifests as physical craving, but at its deepest level it is a yearning for wholeness, for the return to something sacred. The chosen ones feel this longing more than others because they are more aware of the gap between themselves and the divine. They mistake the intensity of their longing for a burden, when in reality it is a call, a reminder that they are meant for something more, that their desires are pointing them toward a greater understanding of themselves. Instead of fearing lust, one must ask, what is this energy truly seeking? Is it simply the temporary pleasure of the body, or is it something deeper? Could it be a call to create, to connect, to express something greater than mere physicality? When one stops resisting and starts observing, the nature of desire changes. It no longer controls. It no longer consumes. Instead it becomes fuel, fuel for transformation, for artistry, for devotion. The chosen ones struggle with lust because they are meant to transcend it, not by rejection but by integration. The struggle is not a curse, it is an invitation. It is not a weakness, it is a test of wisdom. And when they learn to see lust not as an enemy but as a teacher, they will no longer be enslaved by it. They will be free, not from desire but within it. The problem with lust is not the desire itself, but the illusion it creates. Lust promises fulfillment, a moment of ecstasy that seems to dissolve all worries, all burdens, all loneliness. But the chosen ones, those who walk with higher awareness, quickly recognize the fleeting nature of this promise. They understand, perhaps too well, that desire is insatiable. It is a fire that once fed only grows hungrier. The more one chases pleasure, the more elusive true satisfaction becomes. And yet, despite knowing this truth, they still feel the pull, the deep craving that refuses to be ignored. This is where the struggle begins, not in the presence of lust, but in the conflict between knowledge and feeling. There is something deeply paradoxical about this experience. The chosen ones, those who are meant to lead, to heal, to inspire, are often the very ones who find themselves most entangled in this battle. Why? Because they carry within them an immense energy, an intensity that, if not directed wisely, can consume them. Lust is not separate from that energy. It is simply a distorted form of it. It is the same force that fuels passion, creativity, and spiritual devotion, but when misunderstood, it becomes an obstacle rather than a bridge. The chosen ones struggle because they have not yet learned how to harness this energy, how to transform it, rather than be enslaved by it. This is why many chosen ones experience cycles of guilt and repentance, moments of indulgence followed by deep shame. They feel as though they are constantly at war with themselves, caught between their higher calling and their human instincts. But guilt does not lead to freedom. It only tightens the chains. Suppressing desire only makes it stronger, burying it deeper into the subconscious where it grows in secrecy. The more one fights against it, the more power it seems to have. This is why so many fail in their struggle against lust. They approach it as an enemy rather than a force to be understood. The real path to mastery does not come from resistance, nor does it come from indulgence. It comes from awareness, from seeing desire for what it truly is. Lust, at its core, is not about the body. It is about the soul's search for something beyond itself. It is a longing for connection, for union, for transcendence. The problem arises when one tries to satisfy this longing through physical means alone. No amount of indulgence can fill a void that is not physical in nature. This is why lust never truly satisfies. It only momentarily distracts from the deeper hunger that lies beneath. If the chosen ones are to overcome this struggle, they must first shift their perspective. Lust is not a curse, nor is it a test to be failed. It is a signal, a message from within, pointing towards something greater. Instead of suppressing or indulging, they must ask, what is this desire truly seeking? What is it trying to teach me? When examined closely, most lust is not about pleasure at all. It is about escape. It is a way to momentarily silence the mind, to forget, to lose oneself in something outside of oneself. But true peace, true fulfillment cannot be found through escape. It can only be found through presence, through understanding. The chosen ones struggle with lust because they feel deeply, because they are wired to seek something beyond the ordinary. Their suffering does not come from the presence of desire, but from their misunderstanding of it. The moment they stop seeing it as a force to be feared and instead embrace it as energy to be transformed, the struggle begins to dissolve. Lust is not the enemy. It is a mirror, reflecting back the parts of the self that are still yearning for wholeness. And when one understands this, desire ceases to be a battle and becomes instead a doorway to something far greater. Lust is one of the most misunderstood forces in existence. It is often seen as a shameful impulse, something to be repressed, controlled, or eradicated. But this approach only deepens the struggle. The chosen ones, those who are called to higher consciousness, feel this struggle more intensely because they live in heightened awareness. They see lust for what it is, an energy, a craving, a pull towards something deeper. But they often do not know what to do with it. This misunderstanding creates suffering. They either try to resist it completely, only to find it returning with greater intensity, or they give in to it, only to feel guilt and disconnection afterward. But the real problem is not lust itself. It is the way it is approached. The body and the spirit seem to be in constant conflict. The body longs for pleasure, for experience, for sensation, while the spirit longs for something beyond, something pure and eternal. The chosen ones feel this battle more deeply than others because they exist at the intersection of these two worlds. They are deeply connected to the material and the spiritual at the same time, making their experience of lust more intense. When one is unconscious, lust is merely an instinct, an impulse acted upon without question, but when one is conscious, aware, awake, lust becomes something else. It becomes a dilemma, a weight, a challenge that demands to be understood. There is a great secret hidden within lust, one that most fail to see. Lust is not just a desire for physical pleasure, it is a misplaced yearning for the divine. It is the soul's hunger for unity, for transcendence, for a return to something infinite. But because this yearning is not understood, it becomes distorted. Instead of seeking true connection, one seeks momentary pleasure. Instead of finding fulfillment in something lasting, one chases fleeting sensations. And in doing so, one becomes trapped in an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. The chosen ones feel this more strongly than most because they are closer to understanding the truth. They are aware that what they truly seek cannot be found in physical indulgence alone, but they have not yet learned how to channel their desire into something higher. Many ancient traditions understood this struggle and provided ways to transform lust rather than suppress it. The energy behind lust is powerful, so powerful that it can drive people to obsession, to addiction. But when this same energy is directed towards something higher, it becomes a force of creation, of devotion, of enlightenment. This is why so many great artists, poets, and spiritual leaders have spoken about longing and desire in ways that go beyond the physical. They recognized that this fire within them was not something to be extinguished, but something to be refined. The same energy that fuels lust is the energy that fuels passion, purpose, and love. When it is understood, it becomes a gateway to deeper connection, not just with another person, but with existence itself. The chosen ones must learn this secret if they are to transcend their struggle. Instead of fearing their desires, they must look at them deeply, without shame, without resistance. They must ask themselves, what is this truly about? What am I really seeking? And in doing so, they will begin to see the deeper truth. Lust is not an enemy, it is not a flaw. It is a sign of life, of passion, of a longing that is sacred in its essence. When one stops seeing it as a problem to be solved, and instead as a force to be understood, the entire dynamic changes. The chosen ones struggle because they are meant to learn this lesson, to master this energy, and to turn it into something transformative. The fire of desire can burn, but it can also illumine, and when one understands how to use it, the struggle is no longer a burden, but a path to greater wisdom. The journey of the chosen ones is not one of avoidance, but of transformation. Lust is not a curse upon them, it is an invitation to something deeper. The problem is that most people are never taught how to engage with this energy wisely. Instead, they are told to either suppress it completely or surrender to it entirely. Both paths lead to suffering. Suppression creates internal conflict, where the energy builds up in secrecy, manifesting in unhealthy ways. Indulgence, on the other hand, creates a cycle of temporary pleasure followed by emptiness, leaving one constantly craving more. The chosen ones struggle with lust not because they are weak, but because they feel everything more deeply. Their heightened awareness makes them more conscious of their own desires. Yet without the right understanding, this awareness becomes a burden instead of a gift. At the heart of this struggle is the illusion of separation. Lust often arises because there is a deep unspoken feeling of lack, a sense that something is missing, that fulfillment is just out of reach. This feeling of incompleteness creates longing, and longing seeks relief in whatever form is most accessible. For some it is physical pleasure, for others it is attention, validation, or escape. But beneath it all, what the soul truly seeks is not another person, not another experience, but unity. It seeks to dissolve the illusion of separation and return to wholeness. Lust, when misunderstood, becomes an attempt to fill this void through external means. But no external experience can ever truly satisfy what is, at its core, an internal longing. The chosen ones are particularly vulnerable to this because they are meant for something greater. Their souls are wired to seek higher truth, deeper connection, and profound purpose. But when they do not yet know how to channel this energy, it turns inward, creating inner turmoil. The fire that was meant to illuminate becomes a fire that burns. They may feel trapped in cycles of temptation, shame, and self-judgment, believing that their struggle with lust is a failure, a sign that they are not as spiritually evolved as they should be. But this is not true. The struggle is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of transformation in progress. Many of the greatest spiritual leaders, prophets, and sages have faced this same battle. They too felt the pull of desire and the weight of temptation. But instead of seeing it as something to be feared, they learned to work with it. They learned to take the raw energy of lust and redirect it towards something greater. Instead of letting it control them, they became its master. Instead of being consumed by longing, they learned how to channel that longing into devotion, into creativity, into spiritual power. This is the path of transcendence, not the path of rejection, but the path of transformation. Lust is energy. It is neither good nor bad, it simply is. What determines its impact is how it is used. The same energy that drives lust is the energy that fuels passion, artistic expression, love, and even spiritual awakening. The chosen ones must learn how to transmute this energy rather than be controlled by it. Instead of repressing desire, they must look at it honestly and ask, what is this truly about? What am I really seeking? When one sits with this question long enough, they begin to see that lust is not just about the physical. It is about a deeper hunger for connection, meaning, and transcendence. When the chosen ones finally understand this, the struggle begins to dissolve. They no longer see lust as an enemy, but as a messenger. They no longer see themselves as being at war with their own nature, but as learning to master their energy. They take the fire that once burned them and use it to illuminate their path, and in doing so they become free. Not from desire itself, but from the illusion that it was ever separate from their spiritual journey.